What you avoid, you become. You roll your eyes at someone bragging at work, and later you catch yourself doing the same thing. A kid spends his whole life saying, "I'll never be like my dad." And then one day he opens his mouth and his father's words come out. Or think about any rival group, each side hating the other, shouting louder, becoming more extreme. It doesn't matter the ideas they stand for. With how they behave, they're practically mirrors of each other. What if the very thing you despise is already living inside of you? This is the shadow at work. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be going into the very dark and deep layers of the psyche, and we are going to be looking at the shadow work and how to do shadow work. This has been harped on quite a bit, I feel, in the psychology communities, but it is also something that I know a lot of beginners out there who have never heard of this. So I figured I would give my tidbits of things that I've learned over the years about shadow work. I've been doing it for about 8 years now. So I have a lot of books and theory and also just general insights that I've gotten for myself as I've done this work. So that's what this video is going to be about today. So what is the shadow? The shadow, in very basic terms, is the denied, repressed, and disowned parts of yourself. These are things that are cast into the dark corners of your psyche. In Jungian psychology, Carl Jung is the person who came up with this model. He's an analytical psychologist. Look him up if you've never heard of him, but he defined the psyche as having an ego structure. These are all the things that you would say about yourself. I am good. I'm a good person. And then the shadow is anything that you cast aside as what you are not. So oftentimes this territory ends up getting very complex as you grow older. If you think about it, babies start out as being a blank slate, so to speak. They don't have anything that we define them as quite yet. The tagline for this video is, what you avoid, you become. All of us know people who are very evasive about certain bad traits about them. I think the other interesting thing about the psyche and the shadow territory in general is that it is not something that you can just jump into and start to get to know on your own and doing this in solitude. It is actually a relationship-based sort of function of the psyche. The way that you get to know your shadow is by what you project onto other people. So if you're somebody who classifies as very open-minded, you might cast onto other people the shadow of being very closed-minded, things of that nature. So the shadow is tricky territory. It shapeshifts as you grow older, changes, it morphs, and it's hard to pin down. So for anybody that is new to shadow work, the three main areas that you are going to explore first and foremost. Number one, unsavory emotions. So what are the things in our culture that are looked at as bad? Things like anger, envy, lust, greed, things that nobody wants to be classified as. And oftentimes what will happen is you will put that in your shadow and you'll start acting out of it regardless of the fact that you don't want to be that. Another one would be basic identity roles, like you're an intellectual. You don't want to see all the times in your life that you might be making stupid decisions. You don't want to see all the times in your life that maybe you're emotional. If you classify as like a strong man, you don't want to see inside of yourself this deep emotional fear of abandonment or fear of rejection. What else are common shadow things? Those are all role-based ones. If you're somebody who classifies as a good parent, you don't want to see all the times that you've been a bad parent. Things of that nature. And then the third territory that you should get to know once you start diving into the Shadowlands is something that's actually very positive, and that is your golden shadow. This is what you could become. Parts of yourself that were cast aside as being unwanted or unfavorable, but are actually very positive traits about you. Let's just say that you are a very creative person that grew up in a military environment. Then creativity, of course, is a positive trait, but maybe you just weren't nurtured in the right environment for that. So those are all the common things, I would say. Emotions, unsavory emotions, role-based behaviors, and then also the golden shadow. What is actually in there that is very positive that you've been disowning? How do you identify your shadow, and what do you do with it once you know? There are several key indicators that your shadow is at play, and one big one is that you judge other people. This is the big healing modality for judgmental people. If you realize that you struggle with judgmentalness, shadow work is the modality that you need. So what you judge in others is probably something inside of yourself that is being reflected outwardly. If you get really triggered by closed-minded people, that might be because you yourself have areas in your life that you are very closed-minded about. The key here is that when you do find things that you're judging about other people, you need to find the core essence of what they are embodying, and then find examples in your past, your history, where you also embody that thing. So that is one thing that will indicate your shadow, is judgmentalness. Another one is big emotional reactions to relatively small things. If somebody gives you kind of like a small comment about the way that you look or the way that you are on a certain day, and then you just have this big angry reaction towards that, then that could be a key indicator that something's going on with your shadow there. Maybe that person was being relatively neutral, especially like there was nothing malicious about it. They were just saying something and you just blew up on them for whatever reason. That usually means that there's some kind of core complex in your psyche that you're trying to repress. Another one is patterns. So if you end up being in very similar types of relationships, that is a key indicator that your shadow is at play in your life. You're constantly drawn to people who are kind of weak, or you have to be a provider for them. You're drawn towards people that are high in narcissistic tendencies. That is the shadow at play. Maybe you're also drawn to being in a certain type of role, like you like to be the caregiver, and so you end up attracting people who need to be cared for quite a bit. All of those are key indicators of the shadow. And then the last one would be envy and admiration. What do you see inside of other people's lives that you find yourself wanting? Idealistic kind of projections, like you put somebody on a pedestal, you need to understand why you are putting them on that pedestal, because chances are that those are traits inside of yourself that you need to jump into. So I think the big way to handle the shadow, this is just going to be kind of a general outline of what to do once you recognize it. Number one is notice it. Write it down. Like, I had this big trigger reaction today to this person, and then dig into that. Try to find some insightful awareness for why that happened. The second one is to name it, and then also you gotta actively reach into your past and try to find those areas and times of life where you behaved a similar way. Another thing, I think, with the more identity role based shadows is balance. So like if you identify as someone who is deeply intellectual and you're all mind-based and you don't want to look at your heart, you need to start to bring into balance that side of yourself, just balancing the opposites within. So that's kind of the black and white territory. You're taking all of this very deep black and white territory and trying to see the shades of gray, and then also that will open up to more multidimensionality in your life. So why do shadow work? I think I have a very frustrating time with psychology models in general because they're just not very tangible. I think especially with inner work, it is so hard to measure your progress. Oftentimes we have to base it on how you feel, like, and just seeing who you were 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, decades ago. Who are you at that time of your life? And just charting the progress of what you've become. If you do shadow work, the benefits that you will reap is that you will become authentic. You will be able to stand your ground and have firmer boundaries in a way that is humble and not prideful. And people will feel it. They will feel how whole you are, that you're not trying to run away from any bad traits inside of yourselves. It will drastically improve your relationships. Think about the most authentic people that you know. Chances are that you don't have to walk on eggshells around them, right? Like you can just bring your fullness forward. So there will be a certain depth that you have to your relationships after doing shadow work. I would like to now step into more dark and edgy territory and look at some of these taboo topics where we see the shadow most at play, especially in my times right now in my country. There's a lot of polarization around political parties. And it's interesting as someone who has stepped into shadow work territory, because the key healing modality for polarization is shadow work. Looking into why you believe certain things, what triggers you about the opposite party, and things of that nature. So this is prime breeding ground for shadow work, is political territory. Anytime you are identifying with certain beliefs, you are going to generate a massive shadow. I am not judgmental while being judgmental. I am not rigid while being rigid. And I see this in my own country in both territories. And I think it's interesting times to be looking at shadow work, because I think it's something that we just need in general for our culture to start to heal some of the wounds that we've seen in the political climate and things of that nature. So these are all things that you need to see them and talk about them in order to heal them. So I'm curious about my audience as well. Is this something that you see in the culture? And what would you say are the primary things that you would want to see healed inside of people? The truth is that you can only heal yourself, and through healing yourself, you will start to see other people come to their own place of authenticity and change as well. So The shadow is something that you have to look at. It's kind of like seeing the plank in somebody else's eye, whereas you're not taking the plank out of your own eye. That is this territory. You have to look inwards in order to start to heal other people. So the more black and white, polarizing areas of our lives that we can start breaking down through shadow work, the more authentic we become, the more creative we can become, and all these positive benefits will come out of that. But I would say for anybody who is also very seasoned in this territory, something that I had to go through too, this is where the shadow can get very twisty and hard to pin down, is that you might end up going too deep into it as well. It is not good to completely lose your sense of right and wrong, your sense of good quality and low quality behavior. It is uncanny anytime somebody starts this journey. They will no doubt start to attract someone who plays sort of a trickster role in their life, where that trickster will try to tell you that right is wrong and wrong is right. And if you're in the deep grays of the shadow, then that can start to get really confusing. Shadow work is not an excuse to start normalizing bad behaviors. And I've seen that in these communities as well. So you want to be very careful about that. It is still okay for some behaviors to be wise and some to be foolish, for things to be high value and low value. And it is completely fine to walk away from things that are foolish and low value behaviors. I think what happens when you have done the bulk of this work, you end up stepping away from judgment, which is just like, I am not that. And not only that, but you're a bad person for being that way. You become more of the type of person who is like, I understand why you're behaving that certain way. There are probably times in my life where I have done something similar, but I am also choosing a higher route, and I am picking the high quality behaviors of who I want to be. So my camera is about to die, so I just want to end off on some books if you want to take this study a little further. These are the best books that I've found across all of the things that I've read over the years, and a lot of it is introductory, some of it is more in depth. So both sides of the table you can get here. The first book that I want to recommend is Jung's Map of the Soul. If you have no idea anything about Jungian psychology, I think this is a good place to start. It goes over the basics of the theory involved with shadow work. It's very good, I think, just to get a rundown of everything involving Jungian concepts. We have Meeting the Shadow. This is by Connie Zweig and Jeremiah Abrams. This one I thought was really good because it has all of the main authors and people who have really gone deep into this territory. They discuss all of the big and small parts of the shadow, lots of nuanced areas as well. I think this is good for anybody who might be more advanced. I think shadow territory is also really good for anybody who is wanting to get into more gender studies. As a woman, I would say a really good book is Women Who Run with the Wolves. That one I liked for getting back into my intuition, and it has a lot of stories in there about things that you might have repressed over time. I would say for men, probably King, Lover, Magician, Warrior. I really like that for an archetypal studies book. It gets into the shadow of each of the main archetypes, and you will probably find yourself in each one. I read that one as a woman, and I just thought it was really insightful even for me. Another kind of basic book that I read was Owning Your Own Shadow by Robert Johnson. Very good introductory to the shadow work. I think those are all the main ones. So we have 5 books here. I think each one would really add depth to your studies if you're someone who is either a beginner or well-practiced. And that is all that I have to say today. I'll probably do more work on this in the future. More videos and things will come your way that are more nuanced and fun. But yeah, I wore black today because I feel like black weirdly puts me into like a shadowy mood. It makes me feel kind of dark and edgy and like I'm ready to face my shadow. Highly recommend for anybody doing shadow work. But I will leave it at that. So thank you everyone for watching, and let me know if you have any questions. Add your comments. I always read them. So thank you. Thank you for watching.